When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, in today's video, we're going to have a little bit of a addition to my Maester conspiracy video because I've been rereading Fire and Blood. Notably, I've been doing it in class, probably not a good idea, but I finally got to the Maegor and Aenys section of Fire and Blood, and something that I find very interesting is there's two situations that I want to cover in today's video. And both of them are about the care of Maegor and Aenys in a vulnerable state. I've talked about a lot of the times why it seems like the Maesters, they're supposed to have these healing powers, but yet half of the time it doesn't even work. They aren't the reason that a lot of these Targaryens end up healing, or they could be the direct reason why those Targaryens end up failing. Think about all the times that we see throughout history Targaryens dying mysteriously. And so I want to talk about two scenarios. We're going to talk about the first one first because I think it's way more suspicious, but the second one I think is also going to be relevant given the way the Faith as well as the Maesters had a lot of power during this time. So I want to set the stage. Aenys and Maegor's reigns were really defined by the Faith, right? The Faith militant growing, the poor fellows growing. A lot of that opposition to the Targaryens was arising because nobody in the Faith or Old Town was really willing to stick up against Aegon and his sister wives. But once Aegon died, they saw weakness, right? They saw that Aenys was weaker, and so they grew in power. They began to talk out on Aenys, and again, just get people to public perception to turn against Aenys. So, we also see that kind of being a big factor in Maegor's reign as well, but Maegor takes the opposite approach. Maegor takes the fight against the Faith and ends up bringing them to their knees. But there is a key moment at the very beginning of Maegor starting his reign in Westeros. It is this trial by 7. And so we see in this trial by 7, I'm not going to go through it, a ton, but we know that Maegor ends up getting injured. He takes a blow to the head. His helmet does protect him, but he goes into a more or less a coma state. And so I'm going to read you guys a quote from Fire and Blood, and then we're going to talk about it because I find it very fascinating. For 27 days, Maegor Targaryen lingered at the point of death, whilst Maesters treated him with potions and poultice, and Septons prayed above his bed. In the Sept of Remembrance, the warriors' sons prayed as well and argued about their course. Some felt the order had no choice but to accept Maegor as king. So, skipping ahead, I want to get to the part where Tyanna is basically introduced into the story, but this is going to be the quote that's going to finish up my first quote. Tyanna was a poisoner and a sorceress as well. Many queer tales were told about her, yet as soon as she arrived, Queen Visenya dismissed her sons, Maesters, and Septons and gave Maegor over to Tyanna's care. The next morning, the king awoke, rising with the sun. That is very strange. Right? And again, something that we have to consider is that a lot of times when we see throughout the story, there's a number of characters that are told to be sorceresses or having some sort of magic. Visenya is one of those characters. Tyanna, whether you look at in the main story or even a little bit further in the past with Shiera Seastar, or you look at characters and other characters that usually have a lot of beauty, Ashara Dane maybe. So I think you look at the situation. The Maesters had Maegor for 27 days and it didn't work. He stayed basically close to death, but as soon as somebody else that's not a Maester treats Maegor, he instantly is fine. That's a little suspicious. And it almost feels like Visenya kind of figures this out. Like, why do the Maesters seem like they do almost nothing in this situation to bring back Maegor Targaryen? I think it's simple to understand. Maegor Targaryen was on open war with the Faith. He posed a massive threat to Old Town. His death would be very beneficial to Old Town and the Faith as a whole. And think about it like this. Also, you have to think about that Maegor's first wife, who was a Hightower, had been disregarded. She'd been put to the side. Now, later she does come back with Maegor, but at this point, that's not the case. Many believed that Maegor was going to come and burn down Old Town. Right? There's some very mysterious stuff that happens. Probably the death of an official that was able to allow Maegor to peacefully take Old Town. But with that being said, if Maegor's out of the way, it opens the door quite a lot to what could happen, right? Aegon becoming king with his queen Rhaena, much easier to control, much easier to gain more public support. Maegor at the time had both of the ancestral Targaryen swords, had Balerion, the best dragon, the biggest dragon of House Targaryen at the time. He was much more cruel, alongside with Visenya, who also was not a big fan of the faith and would rule with an iron fist. All of it points to they were trying to either A, kill Maegor, or keep him under for a long time until he eventually died. That's what I think happened. This doesn't make any sense. It just can't be coincidence that, oh yeah, Maegor, he wakes up. Maybe it was Tiana had some sort of magic. But we also hear the same thing about Visenya, that she had magic, and if she had magic, why didn't she awaken her son? There's a lot here that just doesn't really seem to add up. And then when you put that in comparison to what actually happens to Aenys on his deathbed, this all starts to seem very interesting. So let's go to Aenys' death, and I'll read you guys a quote from there as well, and then we're going to compare the two circumstances. So let me read this quote to you guys, and this is coming from the very end of King Aenys' reign. The coming of the new year found King Aenys still on Dragonstone, sick with fear and indecision. His grace was but 35 years of age, but it was said that he looked like a man of 60. And Grand Maester Gawain reported that he oft took to his bed with loose bowels and stomach cramps. When none of the Grand Maester's cures proved efficacious, the Dowager Queen took charge of the king's care, and Aenys seemed to improve for a time, only to suffer a sudden collapse when word reached him that thousands of poor fellows had surrounded Crakehall, where his son and daughter were reluctant guests. Okay, does this not sound similar to Maegor? Right? Aenys is in a position of extremely bad health, it would appear, and nothing that the Maesters are doing are helping him. Is this because it was just a lost cause at this point? Was it because they didn't want to help him? But then, as soon as the Maesters stop helping Aenys, Aenys gets better. Visenya, whether that was her just, I don't know how she was helping Aenys. It's not made very specific here, but he seems to actually get better. Now, whether that's Visenya actually killed Aenys, who knows? But you have to remember that it was visible enough that the Maesters said that Aenys got better, right? This isn't written by Visenya. It's not written by people that even looked upon Visenya and Maegor favorably. So even they noted for a time he got quite better. So again, it would almost appear that the Maesters were trying to keep Maegor and Aenys down, right? Trying to keep them out of it, trying to either have them die at some point or keep them as basically a vegetable that couldn't be used so that they could take over the realm. Right? Think about that. Think about how similar the two situations are. Both are basically not able to perform their duties. Both look like they're going to die. And then as soon as the Maesters are relieved of their role as the healer or overlooker of these two Targaryens, things get better. In Aenys' case, he does die, but he got better. Do you guys find this to be just a coincidence, or do you guys think this is the Maesters? Some sort of old town plot that we're going to see later on anyway with a character like Viserys, like we kind of saw in the TV show. It's kind of similar how I think it was in the book as well. Do you guys think that this is, again, another ploy by the Maesters in Old Town to try and take power over the Targaryens even earlier than a lot of people think that they were? Again, let's also remember that Maegor was married to a Hightower. The Hightowers were already trying to play the Game of Thrones to get on the throne with Maegor. And if they wouldn't have thrown such a big fit about Maegor taking a second wife, they would have been on the throne quite quicker than they ended up being, right? Because when the Hightower girl comes back into Maegor's reign, it's like there's already a bunch of queens anyway. So, again, I personally find this to be a little bit suspicious. Not a little bit, a lot suspicious from the Maesters in Old Town. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Maybe I'm just looking into it too far, but this seems way too similar to be a coincidence. But bye, guys.